Chapter 11 focuses on managing the classroom. Now, keep in mind the word choice that was used. Instead of saying controlling the classroom, we're talking about managing the classroom. And we're going to talk about some of the goals of classroom management. What does classroom management look like as far as models, and how do you create a positive environment in your classroom and have strong management? Now, discipline is defined as preserving order and a maintenance of control. And uh, there's uh, there's a lot of control that goes into discipline. But one way to keep in mind of how discipline has evolved over time is that one of the ideas is this interaction between the student, the teacher, and then the situation at hand. Early on in working with educators, it was more about controlling the classroom and controlling students. And then in the 1950s, there started a shift more toward the burden of establishing a classroom climate and managing conduct. And while this shift was happening, began to have research happen that looked at how do you apply behavioral science to schools, and we began to understand that there's a combination between teacher responsibility and also behavioral research. And that really set the stage, that combination, into moving now into what we understand as the use of democratic discipline in the classroom. And that is that the teacher, as the adult in the classroom, adds a rational dimension and is part of the rulemaking capacity of the group. And the rules administered by the teacher need to reflect a level of fairness and patience and wisdom. It's not just about implementing random rules. So when we use the terms discipline and classroom management, keep in mind that classroom management is about being proactive. A proactive teacher is in charge of the classroom environment, establishes the climate for instructional activities, and the whole reason of having positive management in the classroom is so that learning can occur. Norms are generally accepted behavior rules. So when we establish norms in our classrooms, we're saying this is what is accepted, this is what is okay to do. And as a teacher, you have the power, because of your role, to begin to create insecurities, resistance, negativity amongst your classroom, but you also have the ability to do that on a positive level as well. So when we begin to establish our norms, we also need to look at patterns. So what is happening over and over again? What's the pattern in our classroom? And once we begin to have that awareness of that, then we can really begin to understand how does our classroom environment work. We're very aware. We give attention and insight to the classroom environment. By doing that, we're using our eyes and ears to really read the students and their cues and understanding them. One part of management is also the classroom environment, and part of the classroom environment is understanding that there are different gender and race issues, and there's levels of diversity that are present that we need to be aware of. Participation is really important to student confidence and to academic success, and we want students to feel like they can participate without risk of being ostracized, or risk of being put down, or feeling of that they're not an equal part of that classroom community. Sam Kerman put together 15 strategies. Those strategies are collectively labeled TESA, TESA, stands for Teacher Expectations and Student Achievement. And what you'll see is that these 15 elements are instrumental in helping students understand how they can be an integral part of the classroom and how teachers can set up a positive environment. The listing of those particular 15 strategies of the TESA program are listed on page 315, and you can look at those. Another aspect of equality that we need to understand is the idea of student tracking. So keep in mind that a low track usually equals low expectations, and low expectations usually results in low motivation. So that whole idea of how we track our students and what track we put them on is going to determine how much they participate and how motivated they are. Part of having a good positive environment is also working with parents, and our working parents or single parents may be really stressed, maybe overextended in their responsibilities, and so we need to meet them where they are. Keep in mind that there's also now extended families, there's blended families, there's families that don't look exactly like what our own families look like or your own family looks like. Families have all different types of shapes and sizes and looks, and we need to understand how those dynamics work and get to know our parents so that we can understand our students. In this table, it looks at some of the indicators that reinforce diversity, involvement, and how you can keep that high level of engagement and participation in your classroom environment. Here's some reported crimes against students, and this is important to note so that you understand if your students feel threatened in their environment, then it's obviously very hard to learn. So having an understanding of what they're dealing with. And then here's some ideas about self-discipline. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs of that, what do we need to accomplish with a student? What basic needs need to be accomplished with a student or dealt with before higher level learning can occur? And this continuum helps us understand the difference between Skinner's behavior modification all the way to Glasser's reality therapy, and where that lies on the continuum between imposed discipline by the teacher and then a self-discipline. So reading through those theories and understanding how can you implement that in the classroom would be very helpful. Here's a detail of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and as you can see down at the bottom, those basic needs of hunger, just some basic comfort, safety, belonging, all of that has to happen down at that real basic level before we can move up and understand how our students can, appreciate, aesthetic aspects of learning, how they can really cognitively explore different concepts. They're going to have to meet those basic needs. So some ways you can manage your own classroom: get off to a good start, connect with your students, be fair and be very detailed and deliberate in what you expect and how you want your classroom to operate. Keep a check on the environment. You're constantly monitoring the environment so that when small things start to go awry, you can catch that early and it does not move on to something larger. And then as you are aware, you're keeping aware, then you're managing those interruptions. If an interruption's coming, you can manage that, you can anticipate it and move your students back on track to keep working. Here's some anticipated interruptions that occur normally in the school day, some unanticipated ones. If you are thinking through different types of interruptions and how could you handle it if this occurs, that helps you to think through it before it actually happens. Also keep in mind that there is different student behavior and behaviors that are a result of different abusive situation that students deal with. And so be aware that these things could be happening in their life and could be some root causes behind some of their behavior in the classroom.